This is Andy Purewal for ID Boxing. I'm joined by trainer Tony Sims here at the Matchroom gym. Tony, firstly, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good, thanks, Andy.
Glad to hear it. Now, this is actually the same spot when I did my final interview with Wardy just before his retirement.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's a good man, Martin Ward. He still keeps in contact with me now. Still pops into the gym. He's a good fighter, you know. Won the Lonsdale belt outright. Commonwealth European champion. He's a good fighter, and you know, everybody loves him down there, and it's good to see him.
I think one thing, Tony, which I've always recognised with anybody who trains under yourself is you have an unbelievable relationship which extends beyond just a trainer-fighter relationship. It's almost like more of a personal relationship between yourself and who you work with.
Well, I just think that you spend so much time together through the years. You know, you're working day in, day out, and you know they do become your work colleagues and also your close friends. And it's nice when your ex-fighters stay in touch with you and pop down. It's funny because I still speak to like a lot of my ex-fighters from like 20, 25 years ago. They still stay in touch with me. You know, some of them living in different parts of the world and still message me and ring me, and it's. It was funny because one of them sent me an invitation the other day to his birthday. I couldn't make it, funny enough, but it was on Saturday. Funny enough, I couldn't make it because I was at the boxing. But he sent me an invitation. It was for his 50th, and like, well, obviously when he turned pro, he was like. You know, I think late 20s he was, but it's so funny. Do you know what I mean? Just think like, because you still think of them as youngsters, and it's, you know, they're obviously middle-aged men now, but they still stay in touch with me. It's brilliant.
Tony, I mean, you mentioned staying in touch. Obviously, Kevin Mitchell's here as somewhat of your assistant and training his own fighters as well now. Is the eventual plan when the time comes for you to maybe take a back step, you want him to take over the gym?
Yeah, sure, and you know, Kevin's going to be an excellent trainer. As you say, he's been my assistant for over a year now, and it's good to have him working back with me. We worked a lot together when he was fighting, and so he knows the way, you know, my training ways, and you know that is the obviously, you know, the end goal is when I do retire, that Kevin keeps running the gym. You know. I've got him a couple of young fighters that he's working with now under Matchroom, Maisie Rose Courtney and Jules Liddard. So I'm working alongside him with them two, and you know, he's doing really well. I'm really pleased with him, and all the boys like him. Everyone knows who he is. He was a good fighter, you know, and you know, eventually, like, you can't be in this game forever and ever, but there's still a few more years left in me yet, and so I ain't retiring anytime soon.
I hope that's the case, Tony, because I've always enjoyed catching up with you. You've always been good to me. And let's just go back to this past weekend, because there was due to be two fighters who train out of this gym on that card, which we never saw. Felix Cash pulling out, and then obviously the Craig Richards Bolotniks fight falling through. Can you just fill us in a little bit as to why neither of those guys fought this past weekend?
Well, Craig injured his thumb. He had quite a bad tendon injury on his thumb, and I felt quite sorry for Craig, because the last time he was supposed to fight Bolotniks, he fell ill on the week of the fight. He got like COVID symptoms, so he had to pull out. And then obviously he'd been training, and he sparred with Jordan Thompson, funny enough, and that's when he hurt his thumb. He caught him on the elbow, hurt his thumb, and then sadly had to pull out. So, you know, for a fighter, you know, when that happens to him, especially twice in a row, you know, financially that really, you know, really kills him. And because like, obviously training, you put a lot of money into your own training, getting to the gym, eating, you know, you rent on the place where you're renting. So it's a lot behind the scenes that people don't understand financially as well. So when that happens, you like twice in a row, it's not only devastating because you're not competing, but obviously financially as well. You know, it's a big dig in your finances.
Tony, I don't know if you've got a very heavy-handed addition to the gym upstairs, just working away, but just kind of sticking with it. With Craig returning, do you expect to see him, when he does come back, look for the Bolotniks fight, or will he move on from it now?
Well, I think he would love to do that fight, but obviously Bolotniks is in the same breath as, he's got bills to pay himself, so I suppose he'll be looking elsewhere to get a fight. He can't keep waiting for Craig. I believe Craig's got a scan today on the thumb to see whether he's got to have surgery or not, because he's had it in a brace for the last 4 weeks, and they said it's either going to heal up in the brace, but if there's no improvement, they'll have to operate on it. So he'll sort of know today where he's at.
Felix Cash.
Yeah, Felix Cash. He's trained hard for this fight. He trained really hard for the fight. And I don't know. He's got things going on behind the scenes. In his own life that's just not right, and he's mentally not right to fight. So. The best thing to do was pull him out of the fight, and it was a shame really, because he'd done like a long camp, and he was in really good shape. But if your mind mentally is not there into fight week, and you've got too much going on behind the scenes, then it was always a good decision to pull him off the bill.
Was this your decision or Matchroom's decision in the end?
Yeah, it was my decision to do it, and you got. As you say, you got to look after the fighters, and Felix's mind weren't in a good place. So, as much as physically he was ready to fight, mentally he weren't ready to fight, and and that's probably a bigger thing than being physically to fight. And unfortunately, we had to pull him off the bill, and he was probably an overwhelming favourite as well to win that European title. But he just weren't ready to fight mentally.
Tony, with Felix, there's no doubting the talent he has, and on the back of him defeating Denzel Bentley, everybody thought, right, this is kind of his breakout now. These opportunities will come left, right and centre. I know he's had a lot going on in the background with his personal life and his family. At what point does he get to, or reach that certain point where you say, maybe you need to take a step back from the sport?
Yeah, and that's a conversation, we've got to have with him, because if you're mentally not 110% going into the ring, it's a difficult sport to be in, and you've got to be there, and most fighters and most trainers know that, and if you're not there, you're not there mentally in a good place, then, you shouldn't be in a boxing ring. And as you say, it seems like he's a talented kid. He's undefeated, he's world ranked, but he's obviously got problems, away from boxing, and he's just mentally not there.
Tony, before we do carry on with the gym, as we touched on two men who were due to fight this weekend, somebody you previously worked with did return and headlined and won his first fight back since 2 successive defeats to Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua. What did you make of his performance against Jermaine Franklin?
I see the improvements he's been making with Derek James. I see that, when he's punching off his straight shots, he's got him to step into the sides. So I can see what he's doing with him, to make sure that he's always in range when he's punching. So, when you're working with a new trainer and working on new things, you tend to concentrate on them new things that you're doing. Maybe sometimes you're concentrating on a bit too much, and he seemed like he was obviously working on stuff, and he was deep concentrating on what he was doing. I thought Franklin, when he fought White, he was a good fighter, you know what I mean? And he proved the other night he's definitely world level, and even though he ain't ranked that high, he's definitely a world level fighter. He's a difficult fighter to box, and it was a good win for Joshua. I think, confidence-wise, it will bring his confidence up. But we're all thinking at the old Joshua when he used to walk out and blitzed everyone out, and that's obviously when I was working with him, the sort of Joshua that he was. And I think we're all looking for that. But maybe in working on new things, trying to develop different progress, that we may not see that. For a little while. So who knows, when he steps up to fight, for another world title, he's got difficult opponents in front of him like Tyson Fury. They're talking about the Wilder fights. They're really hard opponents. So, why he's developing, he needs to still keep that mental attitude that he had before. You know, his power punching we know he's got, and you know, to develop the new things that he's learning with Derek James.
Tony, after the fight, so going into it, a lot of people thought we might see the return of a more destructive version of Anthony Joshua. It wasn't quite what we saw. After it, a lot of people analysing the fight felt maybe he was lacking confidence, he's nervous. I'm not a fighter, so I don't like to say, but some people say maybe gun shy, or he's too scared of what's coming back at him. Did you get that perception at all? Did you look at him and think, is he too wary of what could be thrown back?
I don't think he's gun shy at all. You know, I think he's obviously coming off of 2 defeats. The last defeat, I thought that, you know, he put in a good fight in that last fight against Usyk, and you know, he's definitely improved. And I just think he's looking himself, in his own opinion, to keep improving. That's what he wants to do, keep improving, and I think that's what he's trying to do. And you know, technically, he probably does need to improve a bit, but you know, he's still got the power in him. He's still got that destructive punching power. I believe he's still, you know, how I know him, he still believes that he can beat everybody. So, you know, I think this win here would have done him good, and he'd go back, you know, get another fight lined up, keep busy, you know, and just keep improving.
Away from AJ, Tony, moving forwards and on to April 22nd, when Joe Cordina attempts to become a 2-time world champion. Shavkat Rakhimov, the man who's the current champion. Tony, just walk me through this fight. We obviously saw him defeat Zelfa Barrett to pick up that vacant title at the time. Zelfa had a lot of success in that fight, even though it ultimately ended up in defeat for him. Given Joe's talent, his ability, his skill set, how much confidence do you take away from what you've seen of Rakhimov, that Joe can go one better and return as a world champion to the Matchroom gym?
Yeah, Rakhimov's like a tough customer. I watched him against Fuzili. He was actually losing on points in that fight, but then he caught up with him and knocked Fuzili out. I watched his next fight against Jojo Diaz when he had the draw, and you know, it was a tough fight that was. And Jojo Diaz is like world champion, you know, world ranked fighter. So really, Rakhimov is, you know, he is a highly world ranked fighter. It's going to be a tough fight for Joe. He's a southpaw. So, and he's tough, and he walks you down and gets the shots off. So it's going to be a tough fight. But Joe Cordina, like you say, is a very talented fighter, you know, and he's got a lot of pluses going into this fight. He's got speed, he's got power, his defense ability, I believe, is superior to Rakhimov. You know, he's obviously got a home crowd behind him as well, boxing in his hometown, winning a world title in his last fight, you know, proves to us all where he is in the world. He's a highly ranked world fighter, and you know, it's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a tough fight, but I believe Joe can do this and become a 2-time world champion.
From many weaknesses that Zelfa exploited, even before some people thought that he'd hurt Rakhimov, and on another day maybe if he'd landed the right punch, he could have been a very different result and outcome for him. Do you think Joe could go one better? Do you think Joe could stop Rakhimov from what you saw?
It's hard to say because Rakhimov is tough, you know, and every fight you watch him fight, he does take a lot of shots, you know, and Zelfa, like you say, caught him some good shots, put him down in one of the rounds, and but he does always come back, you know, and you see him down in fights and he just comes back. So he's a tough customer, and he ain't going to be easy to stop in his tracks. But I do believe that Joe's superior talent will be, you know, will be victorious in the end for Joe. I believe that he'll come out and beat him.
On that undercard, cruiserweight star Jordan Thompson coming in with Luke Watkins, the next step up in his career. Walk me through what you're hoping to see from Jordan, one of the new additions to the gym. So what you're hoping he shows against Luke Watkins? Yeah,
as you say, this will be my first fight with Jordan, and you know, he's a very talented fighter. You know, he's 14-0 with 12 KOs, so you know he can punch. You know, he's got an hard fight in Luke Watkins. He's only lost 2 fights, you know, and that's one to the world champion, Lawrence Okoli, and then the other fight was like a humdinger against Chamberlain. So there he's only 2 defeats. So this is a tough fight for both of them. And you know, Jordan's very talented. He's got boxing ability and he can punch as well. So, you know, it's a good fight for him. As I say, it's the first fight I work with him, so I don't know him that well. So I'm just looking forward to him fighting. It's a title fight, a 10-round title fight. So, you know, I'm excited to see how he goes.
He will be a favourite heading into it, but of Luke Watkins, what are you hoping that actually brings out of Jordan?
Well, he's probably the best opponent Jordan's boxed on paper, and you know, we'll see where we're at with him. You know, Jordan's ranked, I think it's number 15 in the IBF now. So this fight, you know, winning this fight will probably take him up into the top 10. So we'll see, you know, we'll see, because as I say, he looks very talented and he can punch. So we'll see where this fight takes him. You know, I'm looking forward to him fighting on that night, and I think it'll be a good fight.
Quick turnaround, Tony, because only 2 weeks after that you see John Ryder challenge Canelo Alvarez for the undisputed super middleweight championship in Mexico. How quickly do you have to jet out to Mexico to join him? Because I know John said that he's just about going to miss Joe's fight on that Saturday.
Yeah, John's going to go out a couple of days before Joe's fight just to get acclimatised, and then I'll arrive there on the Monday after Joe's fight. So I'll literally come home on the Sunday and fly out on the Monday morning. So then John will be out there a few days before I get there. So he's acclimatised, and then we'll start the sparring on the Monday as soon as I get there, really. So I think we're going to probably train in Las Vegas first, and then drop down to Mexico whenever the press conference is. I think it's only a couple of hours flight, so we'll drop down to Mexico. As soon as they say we've got to go, you know, for presser, and then we'll drop down, but I don't know what day that is yet. So we're looking to be in Vegas maybe a week or maybe 9 or 10 days.
Is he going to charter you a private jet?
Like to think so, but I doubt it. I don't think you'll even get me a private car, to be honest, pick me up at the airport.
Tony, obviously there's no denying that it's going to be a big task for John come May 6th. One thing I'm curious to know and get your thoughts on is obviously Canelo's first fight back in Mexico for a number of years now. People looked at him when he fights in Vegas as being on the end of some fortunate decisions, maybe scorecards being closer than what they could have been. Is it a concern for you if John travels out there, if you feel he's done enough to have his hand raised, the cards might not read how you believe they should?
Well, you just said it there, haven't you, Andy? You know that you're going into the lion's den, and obviously, you know, you're fighting the undisputed world champion. You know, probably one of the biggest names in boxing today, if not the biggest, in his hometown in Mexico. I think you'd like to think that judging's fair around the world, but you'd like to think that everything's fair in the world, but it's not. Do you know what I mean? And you know, it's going to be difficult to get a decision out there. You know, Canelo's going to have the crowd behind him, but listen, John's going to it's going to be an hard fight, because John, anyone who boxes John, anyone, will always tell you what a difficult opponent he is. You know, and he's a southpaw, he's a tough customer, he's slick on his defence. You know, it's going to be an hard fight. He's going to be in there for the full 12. And, you know, I'm not saying that he can't win this fight, because I think that he can. I think he's probably boxing Canelo at the right time. But going to in Mexico where we're going, you know, it'd be very, very difficult to get a decision there. And it's a shame to talk like that, really, because you'd like to go there thinking everything's fair, but you know it ain't going to be.
Tony, we saw Dimitri Bivol obviously defeat Canelo, upset what the bookie saw as an upset on the odds front, and then he came back and fought Gennady Golovkin back down at super middleweight, and he didn't produce that performance everybody expected to see. Do you feel like Canelo's on the slide?
He looks that way, but you know, who knows? Who knows? I mean, he said he had an injury in both of them fights, so maybe that hampered his training for a start, and obviously it hampers you when you're in the ring as well. He's had the operation on his hand or his wrist, what he's had done, so you can't really underestimate where he is at. Obviously, him looking at John, if it was me, you know, as Canelo's trainer, I suppose you would be overlooking John. I've seen Canelo's camp just been talking about Benavidez really, and not been talking about John Ryder. So, you know, he probably is overlooking him, you know, and rightly so. But all I can say is from our end is that it's going to be a tough fight. You know, it's going to be a tough fight. He's going to be in there. He ain't going to be getting John out of there. So it's going to be a tough night, you know, and John's going to come in great shape. And, you know, I just believe that John's going to have a good performance on the night, whether he gets the decision at the end of it, you know. But I think what you need to do is, to the public and the viewers, you need to look like, whether you've won or not, I had a good performance, and that's what we'll be looking to do.
Such as Dimitri Bivol, which leads to my next question. Obviously, in that fight, we saw Dimitri pushing Canelo back. He had a great deal of success doing so. Not necessarily saying we'd expect the same from John Ryder, but is that for you kind of a key factor in this fight, trying to sit on Canelo, trying to push him back, or do you think there's another way you can have success?
Well, we'll just see, you know, on fight night, and you know, we're training a particular way for Canelo, and you know, obviously, listen, everyone's seen near enough all of Canelo's career. We've all watched it, you know, and I've studied him and taught my fighters some of the stuff that he does, you know, and you got to look at him in awe, really, as if to say, you know, this is one of the best fighters of our era. But like you say, is he coming to the end of that era? Are we getting him at the right time? Maybe. But, you know, we're training a certain way with certain tactics, and we'll just see on the night what happens.
Away from him and on to Conor Benn now, Tony. I'm sure yourself, and I've said this to John Ryder, I said it to Joe, I'm sure you're all fed up of talking about PEDs within the sport, given the past 6-7 months. But I know you've not necessarily done more long-form interviews around Conor and everything that's happened. Given this past 6 or 7 months, firstly, Tony, just on yourself, how difficult of a period have you found this?
No, it's really difficult, you know. Obviously, we've never had this before. In 25 years of me training fighters, I've never been in this position, you know. So it's been very difficult, you know. And I know Conor, I've had him since he was 19 years old, and I'm a friend of Nigel and Caroline, his mum and dad, close friends of the family. So it's been a really difficult situation, you know. And the thing is, it's like he's with me all the time, every day. So I know that he hasn't done anything stupid like that, you know, and none of the dates added up either, from his last fight when he was tested to organising his next fight, which was only going to be a couple of months after that. He was due to fight Maurice Hooker, so he was basically, after the Van Erden fight, he was tested. I think he had a week off, and then he was due to fight Maurice Hooker. I think that was early part of June, so we was back into training camp, really, training for that fight. That fight collapsed because Eddie Hearn couldn't get that fight together. So we had another week off. We actually went on holiday on that week. He brought his wife and baby. We had an holiday together and that. And then come back and started training for the Eubank fight when we come back. So none of the testing and that really added up to him doing anything like a course of steroids. And it never added up. And that's why when the first test come back positive, it was a bit of a shock to everyone's system, you know, and it was really a shock, and because I knew and I obviously believed that he never done anything, because I was with him that whole time.
I do just want to touch on that and just kind of move forward from that first test. When the results came back to you, Tony, I've seen Conor say that he was in such shock that you went back to the board, to the testing, and you said, like, listen, you guys go find out what's wrong, I'll do another test, and you kind of carried on with training. On reflection, was that a bad move to have carried on and not just thinking, right, we have to pull this fight or something because this has to be dealt with now?
Well, because straight away we thought it was a technical fault, you know what I mean? It couldn't have been right, and that's why we asked to be tested again. And I think if you thought you was guilty of doing anything, it'd be the last thing you'd be doing is say, test me straight again. So, you know, that's why he asked for that. But obviously, you know, what happened and the whole fight collapsing after the next test anyway is, you know, perhaps we shouldn't have carried it on, but that was a thing for the decision to the board to make, not to anyone else to make. Do you know what I mean? At that time, we was, I believed, and I still believe now, that he was innocent of doing anything. So that's why we carried on training and going into the fight.
When the fight collapsed, it was obviously during fight week. I can't remember if it was the Wednesday, I think, the news broke, or the Thursday. Then when you guys had found out, was there not more of a push internally to say, right, this needs to be pulled until it is kind of more information comes to light and you've had more clear evidence as to why something's happened or what's gone wrong on Conor's behalf?
Because if it was anyone can pull the fight, it's going to be the board who pulls the fight. It ain't up to me, the trainer, to pull the fight. And I believe that he never done anything. So why should I pull the fight? Do you know what I mean? So if you believe that your fighter's clean, then you don't. We just train and go on with the fight, and that's what I believed at the time. Yeah.
I think the one thing everybody's taken away from it, Tony, the handling of the entire situation has been very poor. With you saying that about the board, why do you think the board's taken this stance around Conor? They've been a lot more vocal doing interviews. Robert Smith has most recently speaking about it all. Why do you think that they were so vocal in fight week? They did make the decision to pull it, whereas when they found out about the test previously in the build-up before fight week, it seemed to be that they was going to go along with it, unless I'm mistaken.
Because look, in their rules, in their rule book, they don't recognise VADA. They've said that all along. They don't recognise VADA. And you see that with the Billy Joe situation. When Billy Joe tested positive, they said they didn't recognise VADA. Now, in between them two VADA tests, he'd done 2 UKAD tests, which he passed clearly. So they're recognising UKAD. They're not recognising VADA. So if you don't recognise a testing company, there's a reason. I don't know why they don't recognise that testing company, but there's a reason they don't recognise them. Maybe they should recognise them. Do you know what I mean? But they recognise UKAD. That's their testing company. He'd done 2 tests with UKAD, which he passed. So theoretically, really, they should only be using the UKAD test, really. That's what they're saying. But I think where that got leaked out into the press, that's what blew everything up, because if you look at the Billy Joe situation, he failed the VADA test, passed the UKAD test and was allowed to box in UK. Do you know what I mean? So we're not doing anything different here than somebody else done.
But I've seen people raise the point with the Billy Joe situation that what he had failed for was that, why I don't know, but it was actually a supplement or what have you that's allowed to be taken outside of competition, which is when he'd failed the test.
I don't know what actually he failed for, but I just know that that's what went down.
Obviously, since then we've seen the board say that they're looking into bringing VADA kind of their testing protocols more seriously, taking it more seriously. Your thoughts on them taking that approach now whilst this case is still ongoing?
Well, they should do that. That's what, if they want to bring other testing companies under their hat, then do so. But that testing company wasn't under their hat. It was only UKAD that worked for them. So this is where the big mix up with it is all, because maybe the board are thinking we don't recognise VADA, so we're going to let the fight go. Maybe that's what they was thinking. But the whole 5 weeks of leaving it like that that's what's been the downfall of it, because now you'll come to a situation where they've pulled the plug on the fight a couple of days before, and now that's been the big argument. Do you know what I mean? The same as Conor Benn's defence. He's fought against VADA. He hasn't fought against UKAD, and that's what he's done. He's fought against VADA. He's cleared his name against VADA, and that was his fight. And he was supposed to have done that in silence, like the Amir Khan case has been in silence for the last 14 months, and that's what you're supposed to do. When Dillian Whyte failed his test, it was all done in silence, and he got cleared in silence. So because it got leaked to the press, it's all burst out into the press, and now there's like a witch hunt out for Conor Benn, and that's why he can't go to UKAD or the board and sit his case, because now he thinks it's become personal, and that's why he ain't going to do it.
That's my next question. I will come on to Amir shortly because of the news that broke yesterday. But we've kind of looking towards what's next. It very much seems to be he has no intention of renewing his British Boxing Board of Control licence, and there's a lot of reports coming out that he's going to face Benn-Eubank Jr next out in Abu Dhabi on June 3rd. To the general public and to that casual audience, which kind of really appeal to and has a big following from up until, say, these past 6-7 months or so, do you think it looks like to that audience is running away from the problem with the board, and instead of dealing with things back here in the UK, speaking to them, he's gone away because that's for him the way to continue with his career?
He's not run away from anything because he's dealt with VADA and he's dealt with the WBC. He's fought that case. Now, it'd be good, we would all want him to sit down with the board and UKAD to sort this side of it out, because he's got the 270-page document which I've seen that can clear his name. But now, will he get a fair hearing? Because it's gone that sour between him and the board. Will he get a fair hearing now? Because it's gone past that point. So that's the problem we're having at the minute. I mean, we'd all like to do that and get this sorted, but there's a massive problem there now between him. I mean, he's talking about suing the board. The board are obviously trying to clamp down on him, get a licence anywhere in the world. You know, it's all gone sour between them. So, you know, there's a massive problem there. I mean, if we can eventually get round that, and only time will tell, I'd like to think that we could.
What did you make of the board's move to reach out to commissions around the world to try and prevent Conor from boxing out there whilst this ongoing investigation on their behalf is still going?
It's just all sour, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, that's where we are now. Do you know what I mean? And I think like the public are looking at that as well and thinking, you know, this has gone too far. But Conor Benn and his lawyers have felt that all the way along in this process, and that's why he hasn't gone to the board with the document. And it's a shame, really, because, you know, I believe in that document that can clear his name if he goes there. But it's like, what do you do if you think that you're not going to get a fair hearing and you're worried about going in there, you're not going to get a fair hearing? Because at the end of that, if you don't get a fair hearing, there's a ban and a fine. Then do you go through with that? Do you know what I mean? So that's where him and his lawyers are at the moment.
Eddie has said in numerous interviews that he wants to see the board and kind of come together, and from the sounds of it, you'd like that yourself so that he can clear his name on these shores and return to boxing the UK. This document, Tony, obviously none of it's been detailed publicly as to what's in there. What can you tell us about it? Because it very much seems to be what everybody's missing out on, and everybody's just looking for more information around this entire case. And if you believe it's what's going to clear his name with the board, I'm sure it would go some way to appeasing the fans and getting more of an understanding as to why you feel that Conor has not done anything intentionally.
Yeah, I think that, you know, if it was a neutral thing now between Conor Benn and the board, you know, and we've not got into this situation of like, you know, obviously Conor Benn wants to sue the board for loss of earnings for that fight, for pulling the fight 3 days before. It's all in a sticky situation, do you know what I mean? It's all with lawyers. The board won't talk to Conor Benn without their lawyers, and Conor Benn won't talk to them without their lawyers. It's all in a big sticky situation, you know, and he just don't feel, or his lawyers don't feel, that he's going to get a fair hearing. And that's basically the whole of it.
We saw the WBC when they initially released a statement earlier this year suggesting that elevated level of egg consumption could have been behind the clomiphene levels within Conor's body, and then Conor released a statement completely denying that he ever mentioned eggs within that 270-page dossier. I'm sure you can confirm that yourself, Tony, you've seen that. So what went through your mind when the WBC attempted to suggest that it was eggs behind why Conor had clomiphene in his body?
I've no idea why they've come out with that. You know, I've no idea.
What do you believe is the reason why Clomid was in his body, or do you think that something else had happened along the way? Because I know
anything was anybody. I don't believe anything was anybody.
That's,
and I think I think the document can prove that. Do you know what I mean? Now, whether he wants to display that to anybody else, he's displayed it to the WBC have read it, and obviously VADA. So, you know, it's up to him or his lawyers to say whether he wants to show the documentation to anyone else. But as I say, they don't want to do that. So, you know, that's where we are at the minute. Whether that happens down the line, I don't know. But at the moment, it's like a standoff between them both.
Tony, I know Conor said himself that he has no doubt in his own mind that nothing was in his body, and there's been a lot of talk about the laboratory and the testing procedure which went into it, and it's obviously come out that Conor was unable to have his private researcher go into the laboratory to see the testing procedure take place. Can you give me any more information surrounding that? Because it seems to be, if that's the route that's going down, that you think that foul play has come in somewhere along the line.
Well, you know, it's not really for me to say, because there's a lot of things that's gone on, and there's a lot of things that the lawyers have said you can and can't say. But I do know that his own individual, you know, his own scientist went over there to test the B samples, and they weren't allowed to test them. So I think that tells you everything really in the case. Do you know what I mean?
Scientist was the word I was looking for there, Tony. Thank you. I was getting my words muddled up, but yeah, through all of this, we expect to see Conor return June 3rd. Benn-Eubank Jr is the fight that's been mentioned. Does it still carry the same weight as what he did when they were previously scheduled to fight each other?
Yeah, I don't know whether anything's scheduled at the minute, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of talk around this fight, that fight, until he gets licensed. You know, he ain't got a fight on the table. So we'll have to see, you know, and you know, he needs to get licensed by a commission to be able to fight, and you know that's the next procedure that he needs to do. So I would like eventually, whether he fights next or 2 fights down the line, for him to sit down with the board when this calms down a bit. But at the moment, it's just ain't going to happen at the minute. It's just too much going on, and there's too much back and forth, and it just ain't going to happen at the minute. But I would like to see that eventually.
Who has to be the instigator for you to get that one rolling then, Tony?
I'd like to see, you know, Conor Benn and Robert Smith sit down together. That's what I would like to see.
I think a lot of people would like to see that at a minute too.
Because, like, you know, like, I've known Robert for years as well, and I Robert shook Conor's hand at the boxing on the weekend. So he went up and shook his hand. So I'd like to see them sit down together and have a conversation, and maybe get something started up. Because at the minute, the only people having conversations is both their lawyers. You see, you know, and that's why it ain't going to go nowhere at the moment.
There were cameras about on Saturday, so was that just for show, Tony? A handshake between Robert and Conor, or?
I'm not sure. You know, it's a shame it weren't an handshake and the conversation where they could have gone, look, let's sit down and try and hammer this out. Because as much as the board wants to sit down with Conor, I think Conor would like to sit down with the board, but it's just hard to make that happen at the moment. It really is, you know, and I just don't see it anytime soon. But I'm hoping that down the line it will happen. You know what I mean?
Another name which was mentioned was that of Manny Pacquiao for Conor's comeback. That one received some criticism because up until, again, going back to before this entire situation 6-7 months ago, some people were critical of Conor facing opponents who were maybe at the back end of their careers, and Manny Pacquiao hasn't been active for the last couple and suffered a defeat to Yordenis Ugas in his final fight. Is it something that you was open to? Did you feel that there was anything to gain a boxing standpoint other than the profile of fighting Manny Pacquiao? What do you feel like Conor could have learnt from that fight?
I just think there's a lot of names being banding around. I think because Conor Benn's name's obviously been massive in the press for the last 6 months. You know, look, fight games, the money game. People are in this game for money. You know, it's a job, and like, you know, everyone's come out of the woodwork and they all want to fight Conor Benn because that's where the money is. You know, you got Eubank, Manny Pacquiao, Adrian Broner, Kell Brook. Everyone's chucking their names in the hat. So, you know, Errol Spence, the world champion. So everyone wants to fight Conor Benn at the minute because they know what sort of figures that's going to bring up on viewing figures it's going to bring up on TV. But as I say, like, Conor Benn needs to get licensed before he can fight, and you know, and that's his priority, you know, and you know, there ain't nothing really in the pipeline at the minute until he does that.
What route are you expecting to go down on the licensing front? I know Eddie's mentioned America with the boards reaching out to commissions, and I've seen some have reached back out saying they won't license Conor. What do you think is going to be the most likely outcome or route for him?
I don't know. Like, that's obviously up to you know, that's up to like Conor Benn and Matchroom, and you know where they go from here. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm training him and that's it. But you know, until he gets his licence sorted, there's nothing in the pipeline for him.
One final thing on it, or which you mentioned money, we were speaking about Benn-Eubank Jr. As I saw them both exchange a couple of tweets where Conor had said that during the fight week or a couple of days before the fight, Junior had asked for £1 million to keep his mouth shut. Can you just tell me as to what that was about? I assume it was so that he didn't say anything around the entire testing failure and whatever being released.
I don't know, that's saying you got, you know, Conor Benn, you know, can explain, because obviously he's had words with Benn-Eubank Jr. and that's like a thing between them two, you know what I mean? So, that's, you know, it's not for me to say really.
That's fair enough, Tony. And away from Conor, but unfortunately sticking with PEDs in sport, as I mentioned, Amir Khan yesterday, the news broke. What have you made of that situation?
Well, like I say, you know, it's been done in silence, you know, like most of the cases are, they've been done in silence, you know, and it just seems strange that it's took that long to come out, you know, and we know how quick, you know, it can leak into the press, and it just seems like 14 months since, or whatever, since that fight, that the news hasn't broke, and you know, it just seems like surely the board would have known about that, you know, that 14 months ago as well. So it just seems one rule for one and one for another, you know, and I don't even know what went on really. I've just read the same as everybody else, and this week about it. So, but yes, it's another strange outcome what's happened there, and you know, as I say, it's nothing to do with me, and it's nothing. I can't really comment on it really.
Just one thing on it, Tony, I want to get your thoughts on it. It came out and came to light that it was right after the fight, so it was Amir's post-fight drugs test that had the positive sample returned. On April 6th he was notified, and then received his ban, which has obviously been backdated from then in terms of us all finding out. 14 months on, why do you think it is that it's taken until yesterday for it to be released into public?
No idea. And would it have been released into public if he'd have had a not guilty result? Do you know what I mean? So would you have even known about it, anyone? So you don't know, but you know, I've got no idea at all. It just seems like the rules are just all over the place really. Maybe that's something that should be looked into. As we were saying earlier, if the board's going to recognise VADA, if they're going to recognise VADA, let's write that into the rule book. If someone tests positive on VADA or UKAD or any other drug, immediately they get stopped from boxing. Or if they're allowed to fight this under the table, do you know what I mean? There's got to be rules for everybody, and not just chop and change from one individual to the next individual, and that's the problem with it all.
All right, Tony, I'm sure I've kept you for much longer than what you thought. When we originally said today was going to be 9 to 1, it's ended up being 10 to, 3:30 or something like that. And we've still got more to do, so I appreciate you doing this interview. I know you want to go and chill for this evening. So, yeah, thanks for speaking to me in ID Boxing. Good luck for the weeks ahead.
No problem. Thanks, Andy.